Picture this. It's 5:47 a.m., and while 99% of the world hits snooze for the third time, there's a small group of people who've already won their day before most people even open their eyes. They're not superhuman. They don't have some secret genetic advantage. What they have is something far more powerful. They understand that the first hour of your day determines the quality of your entire life. What if I told you that the ancient Stoics discovered a morning practice so transformative that it literally rewrites your brain's default programming? Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, didn't start his day checking messages or scrolling through distractions. He started with a ritual that made him mentally unbreakable. And the crazy part, this same practice is being validated by modern neuroscience today. But here's what most people don't realize. Your morning doesn't start when you wake up. It starts the night before. The decisions you make in those final hours before sleep set the stage for either victory or defeat the next day. And if you've been waking up feeling scattered, reactive, or like you're already behind before you even begin, then this video is your wake-up call. We're going to dive deep into the morning secrets that only 1% of people actually practice. Not motivational fluff. Not another morning routine that you'll abandon in a week. This is about rewiring your nervous system, building unshakable discipline, and creating the kind of mental clarity that makes everything else in your life fall into place. Before we begin, I need you to understand something crucial. If you're serious about transformation, don't just passively consume this content. Engage with it. Like this video right now if you're ready to join that 1%. Drop a comment as we go through each principle. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, don't skip any part, because even one missed element could be the difference between breakthrough and staying stuck. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern society has forgotten. How you begin shapes everything that follows. They called it the discipline of the morning mind. And what we're about to explore isn't just theory. It's a complete system for taking total control of your inner world before the outer world has a chance to control you. Number 1, the sacred hour of sovereignty. Most people wake up and immediately surrender their power. Phone notifications flood their awareness. News headlines hijack their emotions. Other people's urgencies become their priorities. But the 1% who wake up differently understand that the first hour after opening your eyes is sacred territory. It belongs to you and you alone. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being strategic. Think of your mind like a pristine lake at dawn. Every external input is like throwing a stone into that water, creating ripples that disturb the surface. The longer you can maintain that stillness, the clearer your thinking becomes throughout the entire day. The Stoics practiced what they called prosoche, which means continuous attention to the present moment. But they knew that this attention had to be cultivated in silence before it could be maintained in chaos. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections not for publication, but for his own mental training. Every morning, he would spend time in contemplation, preparing his mind for whatever the day might bring. Here's the brutal truth. If you can't control your first hour, you won't control your day. If you can't control your day, you won't control your week. If you can't control your week, you won't control your life. But when you claim that sacred hour as your own, something powerful shifts. You stop reacting to life and start responding from a place of centered strength. The practical application is simple, but not easy. For the first 60 minutes after waking, no external inputs, no phone, no news, no social media, No conversations unless absolutely necessary. This hour is for connecting with yourself, clarifying your intentions, and building the mental foundation that will carry you through whatever challenges lie ahead. I want you to think about this. What would change in your life if you started every day from a place of inner peace rather than external chaos? What decisions would you make differently? How would you show up in your relationships, your work, your challenges? That's the power of the sacred hour. Number 2, the warrior's inventory. Every great military strategist knows that victory begins with honest assessment. You can't win a battle if you don't understand the terrain, your resources, and your current position. The same principle applies to your inner life. And that's why the second element of the 1% morning is what I call the warrior's inventory. This is where most morning routines get it wrong. They focus on positive affirmations and wishful thinking instead of clear-eyed reality. But the Stoics were realists. They believed in hope, but they grounded that hope in truth. Epictetus taught that wisdom begins with understanding what is within your control and what is not. This morning inventory is where you make that crucial distinction. The warrior's inventory has 3 components: acknowledgement, assessment, and alignment. First, you acknowledge where you actually are right now, not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, where you actually are. This requires brutal honesty with yourself about your current mental state, your energy levels, your priorities for the day, and any challenges you're facing. Most people skip this step because they're afraid of what they might find. They don't want to confront their anxiety, their procrastination, their relationship problems, or their financial stress. But here's what they don't understand. What you don't acknowledge controls you. What you do acknowledge, you can begin to change. The second component is assessment. Once you've honestly acknowledged your current state, you assess your resources. What strengths can you draw upon today? What lessons have you learned from recent challenges? What support systems are available to you? What tools and strategies have worked for you in the past? This isn't about inflating your ego. It's about taking accurate inventory of your actual capabilities. The third component is alignment. This is where you connect your daily actions with your deeper values and long-term vision. The 1% don't just drift through their days hoping for the best. They intentionally align their choices with their principles. They ask themselves, given where I am and what I have available, how can I move forward in a way that honors who I'm becoming? This warrior's inventory typically takes about 15 to 20 minutes, but those minutes set the tone for everything that follows. You're not just planning your day. You're consciously choosing your identity. You're deciding who you want to be in the face of whatever circumstances arise. Here's what happens when you practice this consistently. You develop what psychologists call metacognition, which is awareness of your own thinking processes. You become the observer of your mental and emotional states rather than being completely identified with them. This creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your power to choose. Number 3, the discipline of directed thought. Your mind is like a garden, and thoughts are like seeds. If you don't intentionally plant what you want to grow, weeds will take over by default. The third element of the 1% morning routine is the deliberate cultivation of mental clarity through directed thought. Most people let their minds wander wherever they want to go, and then they wonder why they feel scattered, anxious, or overwhelmed. But your thoughts aren't random events that happen to you. They're mental habits that you've developed over time, and like any habit, they can be changed through conscious practice. The Stoics understood that philosophy wasn't just intellectual exercise, it was mental training. They would spend time each morning contemplating core principles that would guide their thinking throughout the day. Not as empty repetition, but as active engagement with ideas that shape character. This directed thought practice has 3 phases: reflection, intention, and visualization. In the reflection phase, you examine your current thought patterns with curiosity rather than judgment. What themes keep showing up in your mental chatter? What fears or worries are you carrying? What assumptions are you making about the day ahead? This isn't about analyzing yourself to death. It's about becoming aware of the mental programming that's running in the background. The intention phase is where you consciously choose the mental framework you want to operate from. Instead of letting random thoughts drive your emotional state, you select specific principles or perspectives that will serve you. Maybe it's choosing gratitude over complaint. Maybe it's choosing growth over comfort. Maybe it's choosing presence over anxiety about the future. The visualization phase is where you mentally rehearse success. Not fantasy or wishful thinking, but practical preparation. You imagine yourself handling the day's challenges with wisdom and grace. You see yourself making choices that align with your values. You picture yourself remaining calm under pressure and responding thoughtfully rather than reactively. This isn't about positive thinking or manifesting. It's about mental preparation. Professional athletes visualize their performance before competition. Surg, entering the operating room. The 1%ions mentally rehearse complex procedures before apply this same principle to their daily lives. When you practice directed thought consistently, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins to default to these intentional patterns rather than the chaotic mental noise that plagues most people. You develop what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity in action. You're literally rewiring your neural pathways to support the person you're becoming, rather than reinforcing the person you used to be. But here's the key. This isn't about forcing positive thoughts or suppressing negative ones. It's about becoming the conscious director of your mental energy. When a worried thought arises, you don't fight it. You acknowledge it, assess whether it's useful, and then consciously redirect your attention to something more productive. The 1%. Understand that mental discipline is like physical discipline. You don't build muscle by thinking about exercise. You build it through consistent practice under resistance. The same applies to your mind. Every time you choose a purposeful thought over a reactive one, you're building mental strength that will serve you when life gets challenging. Number 4, the ritual of physical sovereignty. Your mind and body aren't separate entities. They're part of one integrated system, and the 1% know that mental clarity flows from physical vitality. This is why the 4th element of the morning practice focuses on reclaiming control over your physical state through intentional movement and breathing. Most people wake up feeling like victims of their own biology. They're tired before they even get out of bed. They drag themselves to the coffee machine hoping caffeine will solve what discipline could address. They complain about low energy while doing nothing to generate it naturally. But your body is designed to be your ally, not your obstacle. The ancient Stoics understood this connection deeply. They weren't just philosophers sitting in chairs thinking abstract thoughts. They were warriors, emperors, and teachers who needed their bodies to perform under extreme stress. They knew that a weak body creates a weak mind, and a strong body supports a strong mind. This physical sovereignty practice has 3 components: activation, oxygenation, and circulation. Activation means waking up your nervous system through deliberate movement. This doesn't require a full workout or expensive equipment. It requires intention. Even 5 minutes of basic bodyweight exercises can shift your physiology from sluggish to alert. The key is consistency over intensity. Your goal isn't to exhaust yourself. It's to signal to your body that you're ready for action. Push-ups, squats, stretches, or even dancing to your favorite song. What matters is that you're moving with purpose rather than stumbling through your morning in a fog. Oxygenation is about conscious breathing. Most people breathe just enough to survive, but the 1% breathe to thrive. Deep, intentional breathing floods your brain with oxygen, activates your parasympathetic nervous system, and creates a sense of calm alertness that no amount of coffee can replicate. Try this. 4 counts in, hold for 4. 4 counts out, hold for 4. Repeat this cycle for just 3 minutes. Notice how your mental state shifts. You're not just breathing, you're actively managing your nervous system. You're taking control of your internal state instead of being controlled by it. Circulation is about getting your blood flowing efficiently throughout your body. This could be as simple as cold water on your face and hands, light stretching, or even a brief cold shower. The goal is to wake up your circulatory system and create physical energy that will support mental performance throughout the day. Here's what most people don't realize. Fatigue isn't always about lack of sleep. Often it's about lack of circulation. When you activate your body intentionally in the morning, you create natural energy that sustains you far longer than artificial stimulants. The 1% don't rely on external substances to feel good. They generate good feelings through disciplined action. They don't wait to feel motivated. They create motivation through movement. They don't hope energy will find them. They actively produce it. Number 5. The practice of protective preparation. The 5th element of the 1% morning routine is what separates those who merely survive their days from those who master them. It's the practice of protective preparation, and it's based on a profound truth the Stoics understood. You can't control what happens to you, but you can prepare for how you'll respond. Most people stumble into their days completely unprepared for the emotional and mental challenges they'll face. They assume everything will go according to plan. They expect people to behave reasonably. They hope their mood will remain stable without any conscious effort to maintain it. Then when difficulties arise, as they always do, these people fall apart. But the 1% think differently. They don't hope for easy days. They prepare for difficult ones. They don't assume people will treat them well. They decide how they'll respond regardless of how they're treated. They don't leave their emotional state to chance. They consciously build resilience before they need it. This protective preparation has 3 layers: scenario planning, emotional fortification, and principle anchoring. Scenario planning means mentally preparing for the likely challenges you'll face today. Not catastrophizing or creating anxiety, but realistic preparation for real possibilities. Maybe you have a difficult conversation scheduled. Instead of dreading it or avoiding it, you mentally rehearse staying calm, listening actively, and speaking truthfully, regardless of how the other person responds. Maybe you're facing a deadline that's creating stress. You prepare by accepting that stress is natural, while choosing not to let it control your behavior. Emotional fortification is about building internal stability before external chaos has a chance to destabilize you. This means connecting with your core values, remembering your long-term vision, and cultivating the emotional resources you'll need to stay grounded when pressure mounts. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, which means visualizing potential setbacks, not to create fear, but to build resilience. When you've mentally prepared for difficulties, They lose their power to overwhelm you. You've already decided how you'll respond, so when challenges arise, you execute your plan instead of panicking. Principle anchoring is about connecting with the deeper truths that will guide your decisions when emotions run high. What principles will you not compromise today, regardless of what happens? What kind of person do you want to be in the face of adversity? What legacy do you want your actions to create? When you anchor yourself in principles before the storm hits, you have something solid to hold on to when everything else feels uncertain. You're not just reacting to circumstances. You're responding from a place of chosen identity. This protective preparation typically takes about 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes can save you hours of emotional turmoil later in the day. You're not just planning your schedule. You're fortifying your character. You're not just thinking about what you'll do. You're deciding who you'll be. The 1%. Understand that preparation is power. Not the power to control outcomes, but the power to choose responses. Not the power to eliminate challenges, but the power to meet them with dignity and strength. Number 6. The sovereignty of silence. In a world that never stops talking, the 1% have mastered something that gives them an almost supernatural advantage. The power of intentional silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of depth. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of clarity. Most people are terrified of silence. They fill every moment with noise, distraction, entertainment, or mindless chatter. They wake up and immediately flood their consciousness with other people's thoughts through podcasts, news, or social media. They're so afraid of being alone with their own minds that they never develop the capacity for deep thinking. But here's what they're missing. Silence isn't empty space. It's fertile ground. It's where insights emerge, where creativity flows, where wisdom crystallizes. The 1% don't fear silence. They cultivate it like gardeners tend to soil, knowing that what grows from it will nourish everything else in their lives. This practice of sovereignty through silence has 3 dimensions: mental silence, environmental silence, and relational silence. Mental silence means creating space between your thoughts. Most people's minds are like crowded highways with thoughts racing past in endless streams. But when you practice mental silence, you become the observer standing on the bridge, watching the traffic flow below without being caught up in it. You're not trying to stop your thoughts. That's impossible and counterproductive. You're learning to witness them without being controlled by them. When anxiety arises, you notice it but don't become it. When anger surfaces, you acknowledge it but don't act from it. When fear whispers, you hear it, but don't let it make your decisions. Environmental silence means creating physical spaces free from the constant bombardment of modern life. This might mean sitting in a quiet room without music, walking in nature without podcasts, or simply standing by a window watching the world wake up. Your nervous system needs these moments of quiet to reset and recalibrate. Think about this. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for more than a few minutes without feeling the urge to grab your phone or turn on something to fill the space? If you can't remember, that's exactly why this practice is crucial. You've lost touch with your own inner landscape. Relational silence means knowing when not to speak. The 1% understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. They don't feel compelled to fill every pause in conversation. They don't react to every provocation. They don't explain themselves to people who've already decided not to understand. This kind of silence isn't passive, It's actively choosing restraint over reaction. It's understanding that your words have power, and power used carelessly becomes weakness. When you master relational silence, you speak less, but your words carry more weight. You react less, but your responses create more impact. Here's what happens when you practice the sovereignty of silence consistently. Your intuition strengthens. That quiet inner voice that knows what's right becomes clearer and more accessible. Your decision-making improves because you're not drowning out your inner wisdom with external noise. Your relationships deepen because you're actually present with people instead of mentally rehearsing what you'll say next. The ancient masters understood that in silence, you don't just hear yourself think, you hear yourself know. And that knowing, that deep inner certainty about what matters and what doesn't, becomes your compass through every challenge life presents. Number 7. The discipline of deliberate discomfort. While 99% of people organize their entire lives around avoiding discomfort, the 1% do something that seems almost masochistic, but is actually genius. They voluntarily seek out controlled discomfort as a way to build unbreakable mental strength. This isn't about punishment or self-torture. It's about inoculation. Just like vaccines expose you to small amounts of disease to build immunity, deliberate discomfort exposes you to manageable challenges to build resilience for the bigger storms that life will inevitably send your way. Most people live in such comfort bubbles that the slightest inconvenience throws them into emotional chaos. Their coffee maker breaks, and their whole day is ruined. Traffic is heavier than usual, and they arrive at work stressed and irritated. Someone disagrees with them, and they spend hours ruminating about it. They've become so soft that normal life feels overwhelming. But the 1% train themselves differently. They understand that comfort is not the goal of life. Growth is, and growth only happens outside your comfort zone. So they deliberately step outside it every single morning, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they know that voluntary discomfort prevents involuntary suffering. This practice of deliberate discomfort has 3 levels: physical, mental, and emotional. Physical discomfort might mean taking a cold shower when your body craves warmth, doing push-ups when you feel tired, or fasting when you feel hungry. These aren't extreme practices. They're small acts of self-discipline that build your capacity to do hard things when hard things need to be done. Mental discomfort might mean studying something challenging when you'd rather watch entertainment, working on a difficult problem when you'd prefer easy tasks, or sitting with uncertainty when you crave quick answers. Every time you choose the harder mental path, you strengthen your ability to think clearly under pressure. Emotional discomfort might mean having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding, sitting with anxiety without immediately seeking distraction, or feeling sadness without rushing to numb it. The 1% don't run from difficult emotions. They learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Here's the paradox. The more you voluntarily choose discomfort, the more genuinely comfortable you become. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Challenges that would have overwhelmed you before become manageable. Situations that would have triggered anxiety become opportunities for growth. Think about the strongest people you know. Not physically strong, but mentally and emotionally strong. I guarantee they've been through difficulties that would have broken others. But instead of being broken by those experiences, they were forged by them. They learned that they could handle more than they thought possible. The morning practice of deliberate discomfort gives you a daily opportunity to prove to yourself that you're stronger than your immediate impulses. Every time you do something slightly uncomfortable by choice, You build evidence that you can be trusted to do the right thing, even when it's not the easy thing. Number 8. The ritual of radical responsibility. The 8th element of the 1% morning routine is perhaps the most transformative and the most difficult, taking complete ownership of your life, your choices, and your responses. Not just the good parts, everything. Most people spend their mornings in victim mode. They blame the weather for their mood, traffic for their stress, their boss for their frustration, their past for their limitations, and their circumstances for their lack of progress. They give away their power by making everything outside themselves responsible for how they feel and what they achieve. But the 1% operate from a radically different paradigm. They understand that while they can't control what happens to them, they have complete control over how they interpret what happens and how they choose to respond. This isn't positive thinking. This is practical philosophy that puts you back in the driver's seat of your own life. Radical responsibility means owning your emotional reactions. Instead of saying someone made you angry, you acknowledge that you chose anger as your response to their behavior. Instead of blaming your anxiety on external circumstances, you recognize that anxiety is your mind's interpretation of those circumstances, and interpretations can be changed. This doesn't mean you're responsible for everything that happens to you. Terrible things happen to good people through no fault of their own. But you are responsible for what you do with what happens to you. You're responsible for the story you tell yourself about your experiences. You're responsible for the lessons you extract and the growth you choose to pursue. Radical responsibility also means owning your results. If your relationships aren't what you want them to be, instead of focusing on what's wrong with other people, you ask what you can do differently. If your career isn't progressing as hoped, instead of blaming the economy or your industry, you examine what skills you need to develop or what actions you need to take. This level of ownership is simultaneously the hardest and most liberating practice you can adopt. It's hard because it requires you to stop making excuses and start making changes. It's liberating because it puts you back in control of your destiny. The morning ritual of radical responsibility involves 3 commitments: owning your current reality, owning your response patterns, and owning your future trajectory. First, you honestly acknowledge where your choices have led you, not with self-judgment, but with clear-eyed assessment. What results in your life are the direct consequence of decisions you've made? Second, you examine your typical response patterns. How do you usually react when things don't go according to plan? What emotional habits serve you well, and which ones hold you back? Where do you tend to give away your power by blaming external factors for internal states? Third, you commit to conscious choice-making moving forward. Instead of just hoping things will get better, you identify specific actions you can take today that align with the future you want to create. You stop waiting for permission, perfect conditions, or other people to change. You start changing what's within your control. When you practice radical responsibility consistently, something profound shifts in your relationship with life. You stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and start feeling like the architect of your destiny. Challenges become opportunities to practice strength. Setbacks become feedback for course correction. Other people's behavior becomes information rather than irritation. The 1% don't waste energy complaining about things they can't control because they're too busy taking action on things they can control. They don't spend time in victim stories because they're too engaged in writing victory stories. They understand that responsibility isn't a burden, it's the key to freedom. Number 9. The practice of purposeful planning. The ninth element that separates the 1% from everyone else is how they approach their daily planning. Most people make to-do lists. The 1% create victory blueprints. There's a massive difference between busy work and meaningful work, between activity and achievement, between filling time and creating value. The average person's day is a collection of random tasks and reactions to whatever seems most urgent. But urgency and importance are not the same thing, and the 1% have learned to distinguish between them. This purposeful planning practice operates on 3 levels: strategic alignment, energy optimization, and legacy consciousness. Strategic alignment means ensuring that your daily actions connect to your bigger vision. Every task you choose to pursue should answer the question, how does this move me closer to who I'm becoming and what I'm building? The 1% don't just work hard, they work intentionally. They understand that you can climb the ladder of success very efficiently and still end up leaning against the wrong wall. That's why they regularly pause to examine whether their daily efforts align with their deeper values and long-term objectives. Energy optimization means planning your day around your natural rhythms and energy patterns, rather than just cramming as much as possible into every hour. The 1% understand that they have different types of energy throughout the day, and they match their most important work to their peak performance windows. Maybe you're sharpest in the early morning, so that's when you tackle complex problems or creative projects. Maybe your social energy peaks in the afternoon, so that's when you schedule important conversations or networking activities. Instead of fighting against your natural patterns, you design your day to work with them. Legacy consciousness means asking yourself a powerful question before committing to any activity. If I do this task excellently, will I be proud of the time invested when I look back from the end of my life? This isn't about perfectionism or taking yourself too seriously. It's about recognizing that your time is finite and irreplaceable. The 1% understand that how you spend your days is how you spend your life. Every day is both a single experience and a building block in the larger structure of who you're becoming. They don't waste time on activities that don't contribute to their growth, their relationships, their service to others, or their personal fulfillment. This doesn't mean every moment needs to be productive in an external sense. Rest, play, and spontaneity are valuable too. But even these activities are chosen consciously rather than defaulted to mindlessly. When the 1% relax, they're choosing recovery because they understand its value. When they play, they're choosing joy because they recognize its importance. Here's what happens when you practice purposeful planning consistently. You stop feeling scattered and start feeling focused. You stop reacting to whatever screams loudest and start responding to what matters most. You stop ending your days wondering where the time went and start ending them knowing exactly how you invested your most precious resource. The morning planning ritual takes about 15 minutes, but those 15 minutes can transform how you experience the entire day. You're not just organizing tasks, you're consciously designing your life, one day at a time. Number 10. The mastery of mental rehearsal. The 10th element of the 1% morning practice might seem abstract, but it's actually the most practical skill you can develop. The ability to mentally rehearse success before you need to execute it in reality. Your brain can't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and an actual experience. This is why nightmares can wake you up with your heart racing, and why daydreaming about embarrassing scenarios can make you feel genuine shame. The 1% understand this neurological quirk and use it strategically. While most people let their minds randomly wander into worst-case scenarios and anxious projections, the 1% direct their mental energy toward rehearsing the outcomes they want to create. This isn't wishful thinking or fantasy. It's practical preparation that improves real-world performance. Mental rehearsal has three components: scenario mapping, response preparation, and outcome visualization. Scenario mapping means thinking through the specific situations you'll likely encounter today. Not just the pleasant or easy ones, but the challenging ones too. What difficult conversations might arise? What unexpected obstacles could appear? What decisions might you need to make under pressure? Response preparation means mentally practicing how you want to handle these scenarios. Instead of being caught off guard by difficulties, you've already considered how you'll respond with grace, wisdom, and integrity. You've rehearsed staying calm when others panic, speaking truthfully when lies would be easier, and choosing growth when comfort calls your name. Outcome visualization means seeing yourself succeeding not just in external metrics, but in maintaining your character and values, regardless of what happens. You picture yourself at the end of the day feeling proud of how you showed up, knowing that you acted in alignment with your principles even when it was challenging. This practice transforms how you move through your day. Instead of being reactive to whatever happens, you're prepared. Instead of being surprised by challenges, you're ready for them. Instead of hoping everything goes smoothly, you've already decided how you'll handle it when things get rough. Professional athletes use mental rehearsal to improve their physical performance. Surgeons use it to prepare for complex operations. The 1% use it to prepare for the complex operation of living with purpose and integrity in a chaotic world. Number 11. The discipline of digital boundaries. The 11th element of the 1% morning routine addresses one of the greatest threats to human consciousness in the modern world: the complete surrender of mental sovereignty to digital devices and social media platforms. Most people wake up and immediately hand over control of their minds to algorithms designed by the smartest engineers in the world, specifically to capture and monetize their attention. They check their phones before their feet hit the floor. They scroll through other people's highlight reels before they've even connected with their own inner state. They fill their consciousness with news designed to trigger fear, anger, and division before they've had a chance to center themselves in peace. This isn't accidental. These platforms are engineered to be addictive. They use the same psychological principles that casinos use to keep people gambling. Variable reward schedules, social validation loops, and fear of missing out are weaponized to keep you scrolling, clicking, and consuming. But the 1% refuse to participate in this mental hijacking. They understand that whoever controls your attention controls your life, and they're not willing to give that control away to corporations whose profit depends on your distraction. The discipline of digital boundaries means creating sacred spaces in your day where technology cannot intrude. This starts with your morning routine and extends throughout your day. No phones in the bedroom, no social media before noon, no news consumption during your first hour awake, no email checking until you've completed your most important work. This isn't about being anti-technology. Technology is a powerful tool when used intentionally, but most people aren't using technology. Technology is using them. They've become the product being sold to advertisers, the data being harvested for profit, the attention being commodified and traded. The 1% use technology as a tool to enhance their lives, rather than letting it become a master that controls their minds. They consume information deliberately, rather than being force-fed. Whatever the algorithm decides will keep them engaged. They connect with others intentionally, rather than seeking validation from strangers online. When you establish strong digital boundaries, something remarkable happens. Your attention span increases. Your ability to think deeply returns. Your creativity flourishes. Your relationships improve because you're actually present with people instead of constantly distracted by devices. You also become aware of how much mental noise was previously filling your consciousness. The constant stream of other people's thoughts, opinions, problems, and dramas was creating a kind of psychological pollution that you didn't even notice until it was gone. The 1% understand that in the attention economy, your focus is your most valuable asset. They protect it as fiercely as they would protect their physical health or financial resources, because without the ability to direct your attention consciously, you cannot direct your life consciously. Number 12. The ritual of gratitude grounding. The 12th and final element of the 1% morning practice is what transforms all the previous elements from mere techniques into a way of being. The cultivation of deep, practical gratitude that grounds you in abundance rather than scarcity. Most people practice gratitude superficially. They make lists of things they're thankful for or repeat positive affirmations, but they don't really feel the emotional reality of appreciation. It becomes another task to check off rather than a genuine shift in perspective that changes how they see everything. But the 1% practice what I call gratitude grounding, which goes far deeper than surface-level thankfulness. This is about recognizing the profound miracle of your existence and the countless gifts that make your life possible, even in the midst of challenges and difficulties. Gratitude grounding has 3 layers: recognition, appreciation, and integration. Recognition means truly seeing what's already present in your life that you might be taking for granted. The fact that you can see these words means your eyes are working. The fact that you can understand them means your brain is functioning. The fact that you woke up this morning means your heart kept beating while you slept without any conscious effort on your part. Most people are so focused on what's missing or what's wrong that they completely overlook the countless things that are working perfectly in their lives right now. Your lungs are breathing. Your blood is circulating. Your cells are regenerating. The sun rose today without you having to figure out how to make it happen. Appreciation means actually feeling thankful rather than just thinking thankful thoughts. This requires slowing down enough to let the reality of your blessings sink into your emotional awareness. When you really appreciate something, you feel it in your body, not just your head. Integration means letting this appreciation inform how you move through your day. When you're genuinely grateful for what you have, you're less likely to be bitter about what you don't have. When you recognize how much support you've received from others, you're more likely to extend that support to others. When you understand how precious and fragile life is, you're less likely to waste it on trivial concerns. This practice of gratitude grounding creates what psychologists call a positive feedback loop. The more you practice appreciation, the more you notice things to appreciate. The more you notice things to appreciate, the better you feel. The better you feel, the better you treat others. The better you treat others, the better they respond to you. The better they respond to you, the more you have to be grateful for. But here's what makes this different from positive thinking. You're not denying problems or pretending everything is perfect. You're acknowledging that even in the midst of challenges, there are still countless gifts present in your life. You're choosing to see the fullness of reality rather than just focusing on what's difficult or missing. The 1% understand that gratitude isn't just a nice feeling. It's a strategic perspective that makes you more resilient, more creative, more generous, and more attractive to other people. When you operate from abundance rather than scarcity, you make better decisions because you're not acting from desperation or fear. When you consistently practice gratitude grounding, you develop what the ancient Stoics called preferred indifference. You prefer certain outcomes, but you're not attached to them in a way that destroys your peace when they don't materialize. You can want things without being desperate for them. You can work toward goals without being devastated if they don't unfold exactly as planned. This is the foundation that makes all the other practices sustainable. Without genuine appreciation for what you already have, self-improvement becomes just another form of dissatisfaction with yourself. But when you ground your growth in gratitude, every step forward feels like a gift rather than a requirement. The complete 1% morning routine we've just explored takes approximately 90 minutes from start to finish. 90 minutes that can transform not just your day, but your entire life trajectory. Most people spend more time than that scrolling through social media or watching television each day, yet they claim they don't have time for practices that could actually change their circumstances. But here's the truth. The 1% understand. You don't find time for what matters. You make time for what matters. And nothing matters more than taking conscious control of your mind, your energy, and your choices before the world has a chance to scatter them in 1,000 different directions. This isn't about perfection. You don't need to implement all 12 elements immediately or execute them flawlessly. Start with 1 or 2 practices that resonate most strongly with you. Build consistency there. Then gradually add other elements as they become natural parts of your routine. What matters is that you begin, that you stop letting your days happen to you and start happening to your days, that you stop being a passenger in your own life and start being the conscious driver of your destiny. The 1% aren't special people with special advantages. They're ordinary people who've made extraordinary commitments to their own growth and development. They've decided that their inner world is worth protecting, their time is worth investing wisely, and their potential is worth pursuing relentlessly. Every morning you wake up with a choice. You can drift into another day of reaction, distraction, and unconscious living. Or you can claim your power, clarify your purpose, and create the kind of day that builds the kind of life you actually want to live. The practices we've explored aren't just morning routines. They're declarations of independence from mediocrity. They're refusals to settle for less than your full potential. They're investments in the person you're becoming rather than comfort for the person you've been. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off, you'll face the same choice that separates the 1% from everyone else. Will you hit snooze and surrender another day to chance? Or will you rise, claim your sacred hour, and begin building the unshakable foundation that makes everything else in your life possible? The choice, as always, is yours. But now you know what choice the 1% make, and you know exactly how they make it. The only question remaining is whether you're ready to join them. The morning you've just outlined isn't a luxury for people with endless free time. It's a necessity for anyone who refuses to let life happen to them instead of making life happen through them. But here's where most people get it wrong. They read about these practices, feel inspired for about 3 days, then abandon them the moment life gets challenging or their motivation wavers. The 1% understand something that the other 99% miss entirely. Motivation is unreliable, but systems are bulletproof. They don't depend on feeling like doing these practices. They've built them into their identity so deeply that not doing them feels more uncomfortable than doing them. This is the difference between surface-level change and transformation that lasts. Surface-level change depends on willpower, which is a finite resource that gets depleted throughout the day. But identity-level change operates from a different source entirely. When these practices become part of who you are, rather than just things you do, they become as natural as breathing. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't need to motivate yourself to do it. You don't have internal debates about whether you feel like it. You don't make excuses about not having enough time. You just do it because it's part of your identity as someone who takes care of their hygiene. The 1% have made their morning practices just as automatic and non-negotiable. But here's the brutal truth most self-help content won't tell you. Becoming part of the 1% requires you to leave behind parts of yourself that you might be attached to. The version of you that hits snooze 6 times has to die. The version of you that immediately reaches for your phone upon waking has to be transformed. The version of you that starts each day in reactive mode has to evolve or be left behind. This isn't comfortable. Growth never is. But the discomfort of discipline weighs ounces, while the pain of regret weighs tons. Every morning you choose the easy path, you're choosing a harder life. Every morning you choose the disciplined path, you're building a foundation for an easier, more fulfilling existence. The ancient philosophers understood that we become what we repeatedly do. Excellence isn't an act, but a habit. Character isn't formed in moments of crisis, but in the quiet consistency of daily choices when nobody's watching and nothing seems to depend on it. Your morning routine is where character is forged. It's where you prove to yourself that you can be trusted to do what you say you'll do, even when you don't feel like it. It's where you build the self-respect that comes from honoring commitments to yourself. It's where you develop the inner strength that will carry you through whatever challenges the day presents. But let's address the elephant in the room. You're probably thinking this all sounds great in theory, but you're not a morning person. You've tried to wake up early before, and it never stuck. You've attempted morning routines in the past, and they fell apart after a few days. You're convinced that some people are just naturally disciplined, while others aren't. These are stories you tell yourself to avoid the discomfort of change. The truth is, there are no natural morning people and night people. There are people who have trained themselves to function optimally at certain times, and people who haven't. There are people who have decided that their morning is worth protecting, and people who have decided it isn't. The 1% didn't start as morning people. They became morning people through consistent practice and commitment to their own growth. They understood that your circadian rhythm is largely determined by your choices, not your genetics. When you go to bed, when you wake up, what you expose yourself to in the evening and morning, how you manage light and darkness, what you eat and when you eat it. These are all variables within your control. Most people try to change their mornings without changing their evenings, then wonder why they fail. But your morning routine actually begins the night before. The 1% understand that how you end your day determines how you begin the next one. If you stay up scrolling social media until midnight, eating late, consuming stimulating content, and going to bed with your mind racing, you're sabotaging your morning before it even arrives. Yeah, the evening ritual is just as crucial as the morning practice. It's about creating the conditions for restorative sleep and energized awakening. This means setting a digital curfew at least an hour before bed. It means eating your last meal several hours before sleep so your digestive system can rest. It means engaging in calming activities that signal to your nervous system that the day is complete. It means preparing for the next morning before you go to sleep. laying out your clothes, setting up your space, eliminating decisions and friction points that could derail your routine when willpower is at its lowest. The 1% understand that discipline is like a muscle that gets fatigued with use, so they design their environment to support their intentions rather than fighting against them. Here's what happens when you finally commit to this level of morning discipline. Your entire relationship with yourself changes. You stop being someone who makes excuses and become someone who makes things happen. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your experience. You stop hoping for a better life and start building one through daily actions. The confidence that comes from this isn't the fake confidence of positive affirmations or motivational slogans. It's the deep, unshakable confidence that comes from evidence. Every morning you honor your commitment to yourself. You're building proof that you can be trusted. Every day you show up regardless of how you feel. You're demonstrating to yourself that you're stronger than your impulses. This confidence radiates into every area of your life. When you know you can discipline yourself to wake up early and follow through on your morning practice, you start believing you can discipline yourself in other areas too. If you can master your mornings, you can master your finances. If you can control your first hour, you can control your eating habits. If you can direct your thoughts upon waking, you can direct your responses throughout the day. People notice this change in you, even if they can't articulate what's different. There's something about someone who has mastered their inner world that others find compelling. You become more attractive, not because of how you look, but because of how you carry yourself. You become more influential, not because you're trying to persuade people, but because you embody the discipline they wish they had. But perhaps the most profound change is internal. You develop what psychologists call self-efficacy, which is the belief in your ability to execute the behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. In simpler terms, you start believing you can actually change your life, because you have daily evidence that you can change your habits. This creates an upward spiral. Success breeds success. Discipline in one area creates discipline in other areas. The person who wakes up at 5 a.m. to meditate, exercise, and plan their day is the same person who follows through on difficult conversations, pursues challenging goals, and maintains their integrity under pressure. The morning practice becomes a daily vote for the person you're becoming rather than the person you've been. Every day you choose discipline over comfort, intention over reaction, growth over stagnation. You're casting a ballot for your future self. And eventually those votes add up to an election victory that transforms your entire life. Now, let's talk about what happens when you inevitably face setbacks. Because you will. There will be mornings when you sleep through your alarm. There will be weeks when life gets chaotic and your routine gets disrupted. There will be times when you question whether any of this actually matters. The 1% don't expect perfection from themselves, but they do expect consistency. They understand that progress isn't linear and that setbacks are part of the process, not evidence that the process doesn't work. When they miss a day, they don't use it as an excuse to quit. They use it as information about what needs to be adjusted. Maybe they need to go to bed earlier. Maybe they need to simplify their routine temporarily. Maybe they need to address the underlying beliefs or fears that are sabotaging their commitment. But they don't throw away weeks of progress because of one bad day. This is where most people fail. They operate with an all-or-nothing mentality that sets them up for failure. They think that if they can't do their full 90-minute routine perfectly, there's no point in doing anything at all. But the 1% understand that something is always better than nothing, and consistency matters more than perfection. Even on the most challenging days, they do some version of their practice. Maybe it's just 5 minutes of breathing and intention setting. Maybe it's just the gratitude practice while they're getting dressed. Maybe it's just choosing to leave their phone in another room for the first 30 minutes after waking. The specific practices matter less than maintaining the identity of someone who invests in themselves every morning. This flexibility within structure is what makes their routines sustainable long-term. They're not rigid rules that break under pressure. They're adaptable principles that can be modified based on circumstances while maintaining their essential purpose. Starting each day consciously rather than reactively, the compound effect of this daily practice is staggering. Small changes compounded over time create massive transformations. The person who invests 90 minutes each morning in their growth will be virtually unrecognizable after a year compared to the person who spends that time scrolling social media or hitting the snooze button. It's like the difference between investing money and spending it. Most people spend their mornings on immediate gratification, extra sleep, entertainment, distraction, and wonder why their lives don't improve. The 1% invest their mornings in long-term assets, mental clarity, physical energy, emotional stability, spiritual grounding, and reap dividends for decades. But here's what might surprise you. This isn't actually about becoming superhuman or achieving some impossible standard of perfection. It's about becoming fully human. It's about living up to the potential that exists within you right now. It's about honoring the gifts you've been given and the time you've been allotted. Most people live far below their actual capacity, not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they lack the daily practices that would unlock what's already there. They have incredible potential lying dormant because they've never created the conditions for it to emerge. The morning practices we've explored aren't about adding more to your life. They're about revealing what's already within you, the clarity, the strength, the wisdom, the peace. These aren't foreign concepts you need to acquire. They're natural capacities you need to cultivate. When you commit to this level of morning discipline, you're not trying to become someone you're not. You're becoming who you actually are when you're operating from your highest self, rather than your habitual patterns. You're accessing the version of yourself that exists when fear, distraction, and reactivity aren't running the show. This is why the 1% don't see their morning routine as a burden or sacrifice. They see it as a gift they give themselves. It's time spent with the most important person in their life, themselves. It's an investment in the relationship that determines the quality of all their other relationships. Think about it this way. You wouldn't start a business without a plan. You wouldn't take a cross-country trip without a map. You wouldn't perform surgery without preparation. Yet most people start each day, which is essentially a microcosm of their entire life, without any intentional preparation at all. The 1% treat each day like the precious, irreplaceable gift it is. They understand that how you do anything is how you do everything, and how you start your day sets the tone for how you live your life. They refuse to leave something so important to chance. Your morning routine is your daily declaration of independence from mediocrity. It's your refusal to accept less than your full potential. It's your commitment to becoming the person you're capable of being, rather than settling for the person you've always been. The practices themselves are simple, not easy, but simple. What makes them powerful isn't their complexity, but their consistency. What makes them transformative isn't their difficulty, but their daily application. What makes them life-changing isn't their perfection, but their persistence. Every morning you stand at a crossroads. Down one path lies the familiar territory of reactive living, comfortable mediocrity, and unrealized potential. Down the other lies the uncertain but exciting journey of conscious growth, disciplined excellence, and authentic fulfillment. The 1% have chosen their path. They've decided that their potential is worth protecting, their time is worth investing wisely, and their life is worth living intentionally. They've committed to the daily practices that transform ordinary mornings into launching pads for extraordinary days. The question isn't whether these practices work. Thousands of years of human wisdom and modern scientific research have validated their effectiveness. The question is whether you're ready to do the work required to implement them. Are you ready to set your alarm 30 minutes earlier and actually get up when it goes off? Are you ready to create a sacred space in your home where you can practice in peace? Are you ready to tell your family and friends that your morning routine is non-negotiable? Are you ready to go to bed earlier so you can wake up refreshed? Are you ready to replace the immediate gratification of extra sleep with the long-term satisfaction of personal growth? Most importantly, are you ready to become the kind of person who keeps commitments to themselves? Because that's really what this is about. It's not about the specific practices, though they're powerful. It's about developing the character that makes any positive change possible. When you become someone who can be trusted to do what you say you'll do, especially when it comes to promises made to yourself, you become unstoppable. Not because you'll never face challenges, but because you'll have the inner strength to meet them with grace and determination. The 1% morning routine isn't just about having better mornings. It's about becoming the kind of person who creates a better life through better daily choices. It's about developing the discipline that makes freedom possible and the consistency that makes dreams achievable. Tomorrow morning, your alarm will go off. In that moment, you'll face the same choice that separates those who live with intention from those who drift through life unconsciously. You can hit snooze and surrender another day to chance, or you can rise, claim your power, and begin building the foundation for the life you actually want to live. The choice is yours. But now you know exactly what choice the 1% make and precisely how they make it. The only question remaining is whether you're ready to join their ranks and discover what becomes possible when you take complete control of how you begin each day. The path is clear. The practices are proven. The only variable left is your decision. What will it be? The decision you make tomorrow morning will echo through every hour that follows. But here's what the 1% understand that most people never grasp. That decision isn't actually made when your alarm goes off. It's made right now, in this moment, as you're absorbing these words and feeling something shift inside you. Because transformation doesn't happen in the future, it happens in the present moment when you decide who you're going to be. The 1% don't wait for motivation to strike or for conditions to be perfect. They make the decision once, deeply and completely, and then they execute that decision every single day, regardless of how they feel. This is where most people get it backwards. They think they need to feel ready before they can act. But the 1% know that action creates readiness, not the other way around. They don't wait to feel disciplined before they practice discipline. They practice discipline until they become disciplined people. Your brain will resist this change because it's wired to keep you safe and comfortable. It will tell you that you're not a morning person, It will remind you of every time you've tried and failed before. It will whisper that you're too busy, too tired, too stressed to add another thing to your plate. But that voice isn't wisdom. It's fear. Fear of discovering what you're actually capable of. Fear of the responsibility that comes with living up to your potential. Fear of becoming the person you've always known you could be, if you just stopped making excuses. The 1% have learned to recognize this voice for what it is. The last desperate attempt of mediocrity to keep you trapped in patterns that no longer serve you. They don't fight this voice or try to silence it. They simply refuse to obey it. They acknowledge the fear and act anyway. Here's what will happen when you first begin implementing these practices. The first week will feel difficult because you're working against years of programmed habits. Your body will resist waking up early. Your mind will generate endless reasons why you should quit. Your schedule will seem to conspire against you. But if you persist through that initial resistance, something remarkable occurs. Around day 7 to 10, your circadian rhythm begins to adjust. Your body starts waking up naturally at the earlier time. Your mind begins to crave the clarity that comes from your morning practice. You start to notice improvements in your energy, focus, and emotional stability. By week 3, the practices begin to feel natural rather than forced. You stop having internal debates about whether to do them. They become part of your identity rather than items on your to-do list. You realize that you're not just changing your morning routine. You're changing your entire relationship with yourself. After 30 days of consistency, the transformation becomes undeniable. People start commenting on how different you seem. You handle stress better. You make decisions more quickly and confidently. You're more present in conversations and more productive in your work. But most importantly, you develop an unshakable sense of self-respect that comes from proving to yourself that you can change. The difference between the 1% and everyone else isn't talent, luck, or circumstances. It's the decision to claim sovereignty over the most precious hours of their lives. Every morning, you get to choose who you become. You can surrender to comfort and drift into another unconscious day, or you can rise and forge the unbreakable foundation that transforms everything. The Stoics knew this truth. Your morning isn't just routine. It's revolution. The only question left is whether you're ready to join the ranks of those who refuse to let life happen to them. Tomorrow, when your alarm sounds, remember this moment. Remember that you have everything you need to become everything you're meant to be. The choice is yours. Make it count.